Hi everyone, welcome to your lesson on gender and sexual orientation. So we're going to start off by talking about what the difference is between sex and gender. Sex is the biologically influenced characteristics by which people define male and female. So for example, different genitals, different levels and types of hormones dictate sex. Gender is the socially influenced characteristics by which people define boy, girl, man, and woman. So let's pause for a minute and just go ahead and associate sex with biologically and gender with socially. So, for example, for gender, time spent doing housework, the sports played, the toys chosen indicate gender. How are women and men alike? Whether male or female, each of us receives 23 chromosomes from our mother and 23 from our father. Of those 46 chromosomes, 45 are called unisex. They're the same for males and females. Our similar biology helped our evolutionary ancestors face similar adaptive challenges. Both men and women needed to survive, reproduce, and avoid predators. And so today we are in most ways alike. Are we more similar? Identify yourself as male or female, and you give no clues to your vocabulary, happiness, or ability to see, learn, and remember. Males and females on average have comparable creativity and intelligence and feel the same emotions and longings. Our opposite sex is, in reality, our very similar sex. How is she different from he? The average girl enters puberty about a year earlier than the average boy, and a woman's lifespan is 5 years longer. She expresses emotions more freely, smiling and crying more, and in Facebook posts, Facebook updates more often expresses love and being so excited. She can detect fainter odors, receives offers of help more often, and can become sexually rearoused sooner after orgasm. She has 2 times the risk of developing depression and anxiety and 10 times the risk of developing an eating disorder. How is he different from she? The average man is 4 times more likely to die by suicide or to develop an alcohol use disorder. His more likely list also includes autism spectrum disorder, color deficient vision, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. As an adult, he is more at risk for antisocial personality disorder. Do males and females have a similar sense of self-esteem? These two normal distributions differ by very little. Such comparisons illustrate differences between the average male and female. The variation among individual females or among individual males greatly exceeds this difference. What does the data show regarding men and aggression? Men generally admit to more aggression, especially extreme physical violence. Worldwide, men commit more violent crime. Men take the lead in hunting, fighting, warring, and supporting war. Relational aggression. Women are slightly more likely than men to commit acts of relational aggression. Slajana Vidovic was a high school student who committed suicide after suffering constant relational aggression by bullies. What's the difference between aggression and relational aggression? Well, aggression is any physical or verbal behavior intended to harm someone physically or emotionally, and relational aggression is an act of aggression, physical or verbal, intended to harm a person's relationship or social standing. How do girls tend to connect socially? Females tend to be more interdependent. In childhood, girls usually play in small groups, often with one friend. How do boys tend to connect socially? As children, males typically form large playgroups that brim with activity and competition with little intimate discussion. How do some women's relationships vary from some men's? Bonds and feelings of support are stronger among women than among men. Women's ties as mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, and grandmothers bind families together. As friends, women talk more often and more openly. And how do they cope with stress? Compared with men, women are more likely to turn to others for support. They are said to tend and befriend. What are some factors that contribute to gender bias in the workplace? We've got perception, compensation, family care responsibilities, everyday behavior, and interaction styles. And I'm going to go over what those mean in just a minute. So the first one, how do differences in perception impact workplace bias? Power behaviors of women are often met with criticism and disdain, while the same behaviors in men are received with enthusiasm and support. She's so aggressive. He's so take charge. How do differences in salary impact workplace gender bias? Women in traditionally male occupations have received less than their male colleagues. Medicine, U.S. salary disparity between male and female physicians. Female physicians, 150,000, and male, 211,000. That's a pretty big difference. How do family care responsibilities impact workplace gender bias? U.S. mothers still do nearly twice as much child care as fathers. In the workplace, women are less often driven by money and status, compromise more, and more often opt for reduced work hours. Interaction styles: men are more likely to offer opinions, women are more likely to express support. How might everyday behavior reflect gender bias in the workplace? Men are more likely to talk assertively, interrupt, initiate touches, and stare. Women smile and apologize more than men. What is a role? A role is a set of expectations or norms about a social position, defining how those in the position ought to behave. What's the difference between gender roles and gender identity? So gender roles are a set of expected behaviors, attitudes, and traits for males or females. And gender identity is our sense of being male, female, some combination of the two, or neither, gender neutral. Much of what we believed about gender roles is changing. At the beginning of the 20th century, only one country in the world, New Zealand, granted women the right to vote. By 2015, all countries granted that right. A century ago, if a woman worked for pay, she would more likely have been a midwife or a seamstress than a surgeon or a college professor. Now, more U.S. women than men graduate from college, and nearly half the workforce is female. What is social learning theory? The theory that we learn social gender behavior by observing and imitating, and by being rewarded or punished. So you can see this child is observing what we might assume as the dad or uncle or neighbor, the male figure, the adult figure mowing. The child is observing that male mowing and therefore might grow up learning that only males predominantly mow grass, which is not true. I love mowing grass. What is gender typing? The acquisition of traditional masculine or feminine role. So again, this picture is gender typing, that lawn mowing is traditionally a male role. Do parents matter in the development of gender roles? Parents do help to transmit their culture's views on gender. In one analysis of 43 studies, parents with traditional gender views were more likely to have gender-typed children who shared their culture's expectations about how males and females should act. When fathers share equally in housework, their daughters develop higher aspirations for work outside the home. Is there another option? Rather than conform to restrictive gender roles and norms, many prefer to embrace androgyny, a blend of male and female roles. Androgyny has benefits. As adults, androgynous people are more adaptable. They're more flexible in their actions and in their career choices. They tend to be more resilient and self-accepting, and they experience less depression. What are some examples of androgynous behaviors? Boys and girls both feel comfortable dressing and nurturing a doll, building and destroying a block tower, throwing and catching a football, and designing and coloring a picture. Father cooks the meals for the family, the stepmother changes the oil in the car, the teen daughter takes out the trash and sets the table, the teen son washes the dinner dishes and rakes the lawn. Pants and shorts and tees of every color are worn by both boys and girls. How do children decipher gender roles without ever being taught? Once children grasp that two sorts of people exist and that they are one of these two sorts, they search for clues about gender. In every culture, people communicate their gender in many ways. Their gender expression drops hints not only in their language, men are handsome, women are beautiful, but also in their clothing, interests, daddy golfs, mommy bakes, and possessions. Children as gender detectives. Having picked up such clues, 3-year-olds may divide the human world in half. They will then like their own kind better and seek them out for play. Girls, they may decide, are the ones who watch My Little Pony and have long hair. Boys watch Transformers and don't wear dresses. How does this impact behavior? Armed with their newly collected proof, they then adjust their behaviors to fit their concept of gender. These stereotypes are most rigid at about age 5 or 6. If a new neighbor moves in and is a girl, a 6-year-old boy may assume he cannot share her interests. For young children, gender looms large. What is transgender? So this is an umbrella term describing people whose gender identity or expression differs from that associated with their birth-designated sex. Even as 5 to 12-year-olds, transgender children typically view themselves in terms of their expressed gender rather than their birth-designated sex. To whom are transgendered people attracted? Note that gender identity is distinct from sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is the direction of one's sexual attraction. Transgender people may be sexually attracted to people of the other gender, heterosexual, the same gender, homosexual, both genders, bisexual, or to no one at all, asexual. How is biological sex determined? Biological sex is determined by the 23rd pair of chromosomes. Whether male or female, the mother's contribution to that chromosome pair is an X chromosome. From the father came the one chromosome out of 46 that is not unisex. Either it's going to be another X, which would make it X and X, which would mean female, or it would be a Y chromosome, which would make it XY, which is always male. How does testosterone influence prenatal development? About 7 weeks after conception, a single gene on the Y chromosome throws a master switch, which triggers the testes to develop and to produce testosterone, the main androgen, male hormone, that produces male sex organ development. What changes occur in the fetal stage? Later during the 4th and 5th prenatal months, sex hormones bathe the fetal brain and influence its wiring. Different patterns for males and females develop under the influence of the male's greater testosterone and the female's ovarian hormones. How do sex hormones influence adolescent sexual development? A flood of hormones triggers another period of dramatic physical change during adolescence when boys and girls enter puberty. In this 2-year period of rapid sexual maturation, pronounced male-female differences emerge. A variety of changes begin at about age 11 in girls and at about age 12 in boys, though the subtle beginnings of puberty, such as enlarging testes, appear earlier. Height. Throughout childhood, boys and girls are similar in height. At puberty, girls surge ahead briefly, but then boys typically overtake them at about age 14. What is intersex? A condition present at birth due to unusual combinations of male and female chromosomes, hormones, and anatomy, possessing biological sexual characteristics of both sexes. For example, a genetic male may be born with normal male hormones and testes, but no penis or a micropenis. Such individuals may struggle with their gender identity. Sex and gender challenges. Dramatic improvements in South African track star Caster Semenya's race times prompted the International Association of Athletics Federations to undertake sex testing in 2009. Semenya was reported to have physical characteristics not typically male or female. She was officially cleared to continue competing as a woman. Are adolescents at greater risk for sexually transmitted infections? Compared with older adults, reports the Centers for Disease Control, sexually active adolescents aged 15 to 19 years and young adults aged 20 to 24 are at higher risk. Can condom use prevent sexually transmitted infections? Condoms only offer limited protection against certain skin-to-skin sexually transmitted infections, such as herpes, but they do reduce other risks. When used by people with an infected partner, condoms also have been 80% effective in preventing the transmission of HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, the virus that causes AIDS. What is AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome? It's a life-threatening sexually transmitted infection caused by the human immunodeficiency virus. AIDS depletes the immune system, leaving the person vulnerable to infections. Although HIV can be transmitted by other means, such as needle sharing during drug use, its sexual transmission is most common. Half of all humans with HIV are women, and 1/4 of Americans with HIV. How can AIDS be prevented? Having one sexual partner means also partnering with that partner's past partners, any one of whom might have unknowingly transmitted an STI. Hence, the first step in preventing STIs is knowing one's status and sharing it with one's sexual partner. What environmental factors contribute to variations in teen sexuality? Communication about birth control, impulsivity, alcohol use, and mass media. Communication about birth control. Many teenagers are uncomfortable discussing contraception with parents, partners, and peers. Teens who talk freely and openly with their parents and with their partner in an exclusive relationship are more likely to use contraceptives. Impulsivity. Among sexually active 12 to 17-year-old American girls, 72% said they regretted having had sex. If passion overwhelms intentions, either to use contraceptives or to delay having sex, unplanned sexual activity may result in pregnancy. Alcohol use. Those who use alcohol prior to sex are less likely to use condoms. Among late teens and young adults, most sexual hookups, which are casual encounters outside of a relationship, occur after alcohol use, often without knowing consent. Mass media. Perceived peer norms influence teens' sexual behavior. The more sexual content adolescents and young adults view or read, the more likely they are to perceive their peers as sexually active, to develop sexually permissive attitudes, and to experience early intercourse. The hypersexualization of female characters. An analysis of the 60 top-selling video games found 489 characters, 86% of whom were males. The female characters were much more likely than the male characters to be hypersexualized, partially nude or revealingly clothed with large breasts and tiny waists. What environmental factors contribute to sexual restraint in teens? High intelligence, religious engagement, father presence, and service learning participation. There's not any other details about these four. These are 4 environmental factors that contribute to sexual restraint, meaning teens not having sex. What is sexual orientation? So our enduring sexual attraction, usually toward members of our own sex, homosexual orientation, or the other sex, heterosexual orientation. Variations include attraction toward both sexes, bisexual orientation. Today's psychologists view sexual orientation as neither willfully chosen nor willfully changed. Are there environmental factors that influence sexual orientation? In a search for possible environmental influences on sexual orientation, Kinsey Institute investigators interviewed nearly 1,000 homosexuals and 500 heterosexuals. The bottom line from a half a century's theory and research: if there are environmental factors that influence sexual orientation after we're born, we do not yet know what they are. Ray's saying hi. How many people are exclusively homosexual? Ray, shh. According to more than a dozen national surveys in Europe and the United States, about 3 or 4% of men and 2% of women are homosexual. When the U.S. National Center for Health Statistics asked 34,557 Americans about their sexual identity, they found that all but 3.4% answered straight, with 1.6% answering gay or lesbian and 0.7% saying bisexual. Keep in mind these dates. These dates are 2012, 2014. What biological factors influence sexual orientation? Same-sex sexual behaviors have been observed in several hundred species, including grizzlies, gorillas, monkeys, flamingos, and owls. What role might the hypothalamus play in sexual orientation? Researcher Simon LeVay studied sections of the hypothalamus taken from deceased heterosexual and homosexual people. LeVay believes that brain anatomy, specifically the hypothalamus, influences sexual orientation. His hunch seems confirmed by the discovery of a similar hypothalamic difference between the male sheep that do and don't display same-sex attraction. Are there genetic influences on sexual orientation? Evidence indicates that about a third of variation in sexual orientation is attributable to genetic difference influences. A same-sex orientation does have some tendency to run in families. Identical twins are somewhat more likely than fraternal twins to share a homosexual orientation. What is the older brother effect? So last slide of the lesson, researcher Ray Blanchard offers these approximate curves depicting a man's likelihood of homosexuality as a function of the number of biological, not adopted, older brothers he has. So you can see as the number of older brothers increases for non-right-handed, the probability of homosexuality does not increase. And for right-handed, the number of older brothers increases, the probability of homosexuality increases as well.